Hi, I'm Robert Evatt, tech reporter with the Tulsa World. And well, when it comes to tablets, the story until recently has pretty much begun and ended with this guy, the Apple iPad. Now, there have been plenty of other tablets that have come out, but really none of them have made a huge splash or kept anybody's attention for a long amount of time. But all that may possibly change. We now suddenly have two competitors that are poised to be halfway decent competition to the iPad. We have the Kindle Fire and the Nook tablets, which are both Android tablets, and they have the Amazon and Barnes & Noble names behind them, and they're riding the sales their very popular e-reader cousins, so they just might actually stick around for a little while compared to some of the other tablets that we've seen. But well, so what are these tablets like? Well, let's take a quick look at the Fire, and as we can see, it's just kind of a very minimalistic slab. In fact, the only real features you can see on here besides the Kindle on the back are two stereo speakers up here in the top, and down here you have your headphone jack, your data port, and your on-off switch. Now, you don't really have a sweep button or physical volume buttons or things like that, so if that drives you crazy, that's something to keep in mind. Also, something to keep in mind is that these are both tablets that are backlit, meaning they don't use the lightless e-ink. I mean, so some people don't like reading with the lights on, so if that matters to you, there it is. So you start it up, and you really can't tell this thing is running Android at all. I mean, they have just heavily modified it into something that's totally their own. So what we have here is a bookshelf, and we have the categories at the top, and here we have what they call the carousel, where you can scroll through all your stuff. The one bad thing about this carousel is that while it's fun to mess around with it, well, when you've got a lot of stuff, it's impossible to really find things easily. I mean, your most recent things appear at the top, but other than that, you don't really have much control over the order of things. Fortunately, you can go into the subcategories, and that works better. And here you have, down at the bottom, you have the, you can put apps or books or something down here in a fixed position and access them however you like. So let's start exploring some of the categories up here. So you can go to Newsstand, which is where newspapers, magazines, things like that live. Go back, the books are much the same way. They appear on a big list that you can scroll. Let's take a quick look on what books look like. And it's pretty much your standard e-reader format. You scroll from side to side here, and you press at the bottom to come up with some options. You can change the font sizes, styles, things like that. It's not too bad, although without any sort of physical buttons on here whatsoever, you kind of have to tap at the bottom to pull things up, which can be a little frustrating at times. So you come back, and then you have other categories for music and video, documents, things like that. So all your basic media is supported here. And as you can see, it takes a little while to switch from category to category. It's nothing hugely frustrating, but it's not too bad. So, and of course, everything in the tablet is tied to the Amazon store, so obviously you need to be a fan of that. You can, in fact, put your own material on here. Amazon prefers you do it through their Amazon Cloud, which allows you to wirelessly put things into their computers and then download it to whatever device you wish. And the good thing is that this will also let you keep tabs on everything you have in the cloud versus everything you have on the device. So there's really no guesswork here, and it works pretty well. Unfortunately, the tablet is not quite as responsive as I'd like. As I've said, it doesn't really pull things up as fast as I'd like, and sometimes just switching through the pages just isn't as smooth as you'd like it to be, or might have seen in other tablets. It's noticeably choppy a little bit, but again, it's not bad. It's it's something you can certainly live with. There are apps here, but they don't run apps from the general Android store. Instead, you can get apps from the Amazon store, which is their own competing store, which has far fewer apps than the greater Android pool. The good news is that it's been up and running on phones for a while, so it's somewhat well populated, but that's another thing to keep in mind. So our next subject is the Nook tablets from Barnes & Noble, and as you can see, it's got a much more distinctive style. It's stack it up on top of these, and the Nook is a little bit taller and a little bit wider. It's about the same thickness. Weight is just a hair thinner, but it's got more physical buttons. You've got your on switch here and data port, and you have external volume things. Unfortunately, the volume buttons are a little small, and it's easily to mash both of them at the same time, and you have a home button here shaped like an M. So you open it up, and this device looks a lot more like Android. It's still heavily modified, but you still have the multiple pages of home screens that you can scroll between, and you can customize them to your heart's content, put whatever apps or applications, books on here, change the background. It's a lot more flexible than the Fire, which is what you see is what you get. Now with here, the navigation is a little bit interesting. You can see down here at the bottom, you can go to the general categories, books, newsstand. It's very similar, but unfortunately, you have to do multiple clicks to get to what's in your library sometimes. And also the store, the way to get to the store is that you have to press this Nook button and then go to shop. It's not quite as well integrated as the Kindle Fire. It's certainly there, but it's just a little bit clunkier. As you can see the screen, I think the screen is a little bit brighter and sharper than the Fire. Not by a huge amount, but there is a difference there. Also, another quirk you should know is that, again, you can load up all of your media to your heart's content, books, movies, music, but as of right now, Barnes & Noble doesn't sell movies and music of their own. You can't buy it on the device and watch it or listen to it right then. You have to buy it elsewhere and then load it up on the device. So you certainly have to keep that in mind. The e-reading, I think, has a little bit of an advantage because you have similar options down here to the Fire, but you also have a brightness option, which I personally appreciate. Say you're reading in bed and the lights are off, and you can turn the brightness down quite a bit. And I like the fact that you can do that directly on the book itself. Well, so how do these guys stack up against the big granddaddy, the iPad? Well, honestly, they really don't measure up if you get right down to it. I mean, the iPad is a much more smoother experience. They've had longer to work on it. It's got loads more apps. It's got loads more options integrated into it that you can easily use. It's just, in most senses of the word, it's a better tablet. But of course, here's the thing. Here's the main difference between the two is the price. I mean, these two guys right here, this will run you $200. This will run you $250. The iPad starts at $499 and runs up above $800, which is a fair chunk of change. But you get down to $200 and $250. I mean, even though these aren't as good as the iPad, I mean, they're good enough. I mean, you'll be able to read your books if you want to consume media. I mean, they're good at consuming media. You can do a little bit of web surfing. Both their web pages work well. So honestly, for $200, $250, they work well. I mean, they're not, if you want the absolute finest, the iPad is still it, but these two tablets here, I mean, they're competitive if you don't want to shell out a huge amount of money for your tablet.